Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of My Week in Horror. I am the Artie Dans. This is episode 12, I believe it is, and in this one, we're going to look at something that was kind of recommended. Someone was a bit more specific than this, so I took their idea and made it a bit bigger. We're going to look at murderous monster movies. So, movies that feature kind of monster type characters. And I've picked 4 movies that you probably have never heard of and are going to come as a real surprise. So sit back and relax and enjoy tonight's episode. The 4 movies we're looking at are Jenglot, Pantai, Selatan from Indonesia, Histeria from Malaysia, The Debutantes from the Philippines, and Lizard Woman from Thailand. Have you heard of any of those? My guess is that you probably haven't. So let's check out the first one, which is the Indonesian movie. Thank you, Dan. And this is the first one of tonight. This is the first movie that we're going to look at tonight. And it's Jenglot, Pantai, Selatan from Indonesia. This is a crazy movie. And I covered it recently on an episode of Dude, I Watched a Fucked Up Movie Last Night. But let's check out the synopsis. A group of friends head to a beach for a massive party, but while there, a monstrous creature from a nearby village has been spotted. The creature is a jenglot, a small animal-shaped monster with a human-like face and sharp teeth, a long tail, and the ability to move at lightning speed. The jenglot is a creature born from supernatural elements. The jenglot starts to stalk and kill the partygoers in brutal and hilarious ways, in between taking time to check out the hot Indonesian girls dancing on the beach. But one of the friends has a spell cast on her that gives her a close connection to the jenglot. From 2011. Now, I understand that this comes from a period of absolute batshit craziness in Indonesian cinema, where a lot of very nutty, very sexy, very crazy movies were made. And I think this one is just the tip of the iceberg, and I hope to have a lot more of these movies in the future. Interestingly, the director of this film is the director of one of my favorite Indonesian films, Kuntilanak, or The Chanting, the original one from 2006, starring Julie Estelle. This guy directed all 3 of those Kuntilanak movies, and then somehow had a brain fart and went off and made all these wacky, crazy movies like this one. So this one has a lot of very, very sexy Indonesian women in a lot of bikinis, and there is a lot of focusing on that shit. I'm not complaining, by the way. I think it was awesome. But there's a lot of alcohol and there's a lot of sex talk in this movie, and I thought for a Muslim country like Indonesia, all that shit's a bit no-no. But no, all goes in this movie. It is a typical kind of monstery type movie where it just doesn't make any sense. This creature moves from location to location to location to location so ridiculously quick that continuity is not the movie's strong point. There's really a lot of this shit doesn't make any sense. And in fact, there's a massive continuity error in the film where one of the victims, you see an establishing shot of her in one different bikini, and then when she comes out of the beach a couple of seconds later, the water a couple of seconds later, with her arm bitten off, there's a completely different bikini. So clearly continuity and script logicness were not a massive part of the movie. But that's what makes it so great. I mean, this is a really fun movie. It's short. It's an hour and 20 odd minutes, so you don't get bored through it. A lot happens. There is a kill count of 13 people. So that's pretty good for a movie like this. But it has some pretty dodgy effects. And when I mean dodgy effects, I mean dodgy effects. 2011, Southeast Asia, they're not going all out on the CGI. And thank God, I don't recall CGI in this film. But it's obvious that the jenglot is a puppet when all of a sudden the actor will catch the monster and then pretend like it's biting her neck. I mean, it's great, but it's clearly fake, and it's cool. And there are what I like is that, you've got this rubber puppet or whatever the fuck it is, and then you get these close-ups of a human face with teeth doing all monstrous shit, and it makes this really funny sound as it moves around. This is a fun film to watch. I mean, I really have to recommend this film. What can I compare it to? the thing that's coming to my head the most, and I don't understand why, is the Chinese movie Bugs 3D. It's the closest thing that I'm getting with, the sexy beach setting, this kind of monsters that attack everyone. But Bugs had a lot of CGI in it, which was kind of okay. This has no CGI in it, but it has a lot of blood in it. It's definitely not afraid to show blood. The only thing that would have made this movie better is if the boobs were out of the bras, the bikinis. And I understand that probably, that happens in Indonesia, but very rarely. So it wasn't going to happen in this film. But if that did happen, I reckon this movie would have scored a bit higher. Like I said, it makes no sense. Two kills actually don't even happen on screen, which is a bit disappointing because they're two really good characters, which you kind of don't want to die because they're both a bit dumb, but they're kind of cute. But you don't want them to die, and they die. And it's unexplained how it dies. And again, that's part of this movie. That's what's wrong with this movie. A lot of stuff just happens, and it's not really explained. It feels like it was edited before release because some of the death scenes are a little too quick, and some of the death scenes are fantastic. Like, there's this bit where there's a woman walking around with her arm eaten clean off, just straight down to the bone. That's great. And she's got to pretend her arm is sticking out, and she gets on the beach, and everyone screams. Not a single person wants to help her out. It is fucking great. The people behind this movie, seriously, you did a great job. If you want to know more about it, watch the video that I made called Dude, I Watched a Fucked Up Movie Last Night, episode 1, Jenglot, Pantai, Selatan, where I kind of go through the whole movie and kind of explain it a bit more. But using the ghost rating, great horror or stupid trash, I'm going to award this 3 out of 5 purely for how fun it is. If you want to sit down and watch just a fun, silly monster movie that doesn't have big, scary monsters, but has this small little ugly creature, and you see a lot of it, so it's not like some of the other movies that we're going to look at tonight where you don't see the monster too much. You see a lot of the monster in this one, and it is great. I really recommend this. You really have to watch this. So 3 out of 5, great start to tonight's episode. Let's get on to the next one, which is rumoured to be Malaysia's best ever horror movie. Thanks, Dan. So while putting together this episode and the movies for this episode, all these movies were supplied to me by a great friend of the channel. You know who you are. He said to me, Dan, I think this is the best horror movie to come out of Malaysia. What do you think of it? I watched it and thought, I think you're pretty spot on with this one. So this movie is called Histeria, spelled for some reason with an I, because I've later found out that Malaysians don't have a Y. It doesn't make sense because there's a Y in Malaysia. Okay, maybe we've got to do a bit more research on this one. But anyway, this is a movie called Histeria from 2008. So let's check out the synopsis. In this film, we follow 6 young teenage girls who have been sentenced to detention at their boarding school for playing a prank on a Muslim witch doctor by pretending to be possessed after they perform a ritual on an anthill. During their detention, a strange series of murders occurs, and something very sinister keeps hunting all the girls, seemingly being controlled by the most innocent member of the group. So this movie starts off with a bang, and then goes a little bit slow, and then picks up again right at the end. And so the movie starts off with the youngest girl in the group, Murni, something like that, being approached by her teacher and a police officer, and they take her to hospital where they try to find out what's happened to all of her friends. They've all been murdered, and obviously she's the suspect. And she keeps screaming about something that's attacked them. So then we go back in time, about a week, and we see these girls. They're troublemakers at their campus. So it's a boarding school where rich parents or parents that don't really want to deal with their kids send them there to kind of forget about them. And so all these girls have a bit of a troubled past, and so they're friends. But she's the youngest one, and she kind of gets bullied by the rest of them. And they find this anthill, and they perform this ritual that they downloaded off the internet to kind of summon a spirit. And seemingly thinking it doesn't work, or hasn't worked, they decide to play a prank on everyone by one of the girls pretending to be possessed. So she does a really good job at it, sells it really well. But that scores them this kind of few days in detention. So while they're at detention, another girl comes in, a sixth girl, who kind of joins their group. And that's important because the sixth girl that joins the group ends up making friends, and very close friends, with the girl who is the main girl that we follow's closer friend. And what you actually discover as this movie's going along is that it is a coming-of-age movie set in a horror movie. It is about a teenage girl. In this case, I believe the character's name's Mooney or something like that, right? It's essentially her coming to grips with her hitting puberty and all the changes that happen to her both her body and herself through puberty. And it's told in a horror story. So you're witness to a lot of like teenage girl sexuality. There's talks of lesbianism. There's talks of boys. And we see some of the boys that some of the girls are dating. And that seems to be what the main focus is on the film is. But then we do get to see the creature. And the creature is quite hideous. You don't see it much, but you do see it. It sits in the background and kind of stalks along it. And it is alluded to that this creature is the one that is killing all the girls in the film. But you don't actually explicitly see who's killing them. You just see the bodies getting flung around. And speaking of getting flung around, there's a lot of blood in this movie. So it's quite gory when it gets started. So if you can put up with that first 30 to 40 minutes of all the establishing shots where you kind of get a sense of who all the girls are and what role they play in the main girl's life, then it all kind of comes together. Now, I've kind of given away a bit of a spoiler in the synopsis, but it's kind of a bit obvious when you watch the film because the girl who is alive at the start of the movie, who's still left alive, it's then alluded to all the way through the movie that it's kind of all of her doing everything based on the spirit and based on all these little things that keep happening to her. So it's quite clever. And I really enjoy this. So going back to what I said at the start, where my friend said this was the best, potentially the best Malaysian horror movie ever made. I haven't seen too many Malaysian horror movies, and the ones I have seen have been rather average. So then I jumped online and I saw what other people were saying about this film. And lo and behold, that seems to be the main vibe going around. That this is, from 2008, the best horror movie to ever come out of Malaysia. And so I'm not going to argue with a whole bunch of people on the internet. God knows I don't have enough time in my life to do shit like that. But this is really good. Effects-wise, it's very restrained. I don't remember too much of anything looking bad. A lot of the film's dark, and a lot of what happens in the film happens at night time. So, you struggle to see a lot of the detail that's going on in the background. And you do get a bit of a sense of loneliness in the film for the main character. And that's exacerbated by the backstory that you get about her. And in fact, the backstory about all the girls in the film. Thankfully, for a movie about teenage girls, they're not that annoying. So you're able to kind of get through the movie without kind of wanting to turn it off because they're being typical teenage girls. That part of the movie gets a positive from me as well. I don't know too much about the crew behind this film, but I just think that they've done an excellent job. So if you have a chance to see Histeria, I would give it a shot. So using the ghost rating, great horror or stupid trash, this is tonight's highest rating film. This is 4 ghosts out of 5. It's never going to get anywhere near a 5 ghost film, but for what it is, a Malaysian movie about a teenage girl's coming of age story. Potentially the monster is a period monster. Maybe that's what they're trying to imply here. Maybe the director had a tough teenage girl that he was, daughter, and the movie's a reflection of her. Probably likely. But for that factor alone, it's a great watch. So check it out. Histeria from Malaysia, 2008, a 4 ghost film. Now, a short message from me. Pardon the interruption, everyone. I thought I'd just take a brief moment of your time to tell you about how The Arty Dans is on all those social media sites. So firstly, you can find me on Facebook at Arty Dans. You can find me on Instagram at The Arty Dans. You can find me on Reddit as The Arty Dans. You can also find me on the web at www.theartydans.com, and you can also find me on Odyssey as, take a guess, The Arty Dans. Thank you, and let's get back to the video. Thank you, Me. That was very interesting. You also forgot to mention that that I am also on Substack. So you can go to www.theartydans.substack.com and subscribe there. I put a lot of my older reviews on there. A lot of this new stuff goes on there too. The alerts are far better than YouTube. So if you do enjoy some of the stuff that I do, please check out Substack because it's just better all round in regards to alerts. Now, we've already covered 2 good movies. Unfortunately, the next 2 movies I've got for you aren't that great. First up, we're going to look at the Philippine film called The Debutantes. This is from 2017, so it's the newest movie on this list. Let's check out the synopsis first. A troubled and awkward young girl all of a sudden finds herself attached to the hip crowd when she helps one of them with her homework. She gets invited to a debutante party for one of the girl's 18th birthday, which also happens to be her 18th birthday as well. But they play a vicious prank on her, and the emotions of the event triggers a violent supernatural being who is hell-bent on protecting her from the rest of the girls. So this movie had promise. Following on from Hysteria, where we had one group of teenage girls, we move on to another group of teenage girls. Now these ones are horrible, unlike in Hysteria. They're not really horrible. They're just kind of coming of age. But these ones have established themselves as full bitch horrible. So what we've got is a very awkward young girl who lives with her auntie, and another little girl also seems to live there. And that little girl's quite important to the whole plot of the film. And then she goes to her school where she kind of lusts, not in a sexual way, but lusts after this other girl, and likes to video her. They share a class together. And then once she finds out that she's having some trouble with one of her subjects, that girl asks her, the awkward girl, to be her tutor and to help her with her maths homework. All goes well. And then she gets invited to this party, this 18th birthday party. A debutante party? Debutante party? I don't know how you say that. In Australia, it's a debutante party. And that's when they play a nasty prank on her by pulling down her dress, exposing some of the scars on her back. And of course, the video goes viral. You know, this is 2017, so we're talking age of Instagram and Facebook viral stuff. And it leads to a bit of bullying. In a bit of a nod to Carrie, Sissy Spacek Carrie, or even the Chloe Montanez, whatever you say her name's version of Carrie, she starts to get her revenge back. In this case, the revenge is a bit inadvertent on it, because she doesn't actually realize that the way that these girls are getting killed is because of her. And specifically, the little girl that's attached to her. Now, there's a great backstory that comes how she met the little girl and what the little girl means to her. And that comes later in the film as, and a great time later in the film as you're trying to think, what the fuck's going on in this film. But the movie suffers big time from a lack of time continuity. And what I mean by that, we've seen this in quite a few films before, is that an event will happen, and then another event will happen almost immediately, and then another event will happen almost immediately. That kind of makes no sense that these 3 things would happen so quickly. So in this case, the girl has her 18th birthday party. It seems like the next day they're burying her, and the next day after, another one of the girls is having another 18th birthday party. It kind of just... Why are all their birthday parties so close? How did no one know this? And where's the grieving period in between all of these events? I kind of hate that stuff, because it takes me out of the movie. I mean, I've just watched a girl get killed, and everyone's at her funeral. And no one's really sad, which may be due to the fact that they're all bitches. So, maybe they're really genuinely not sad. I liked the monster in this film. Again, it's like the previous film Hysteria. You don't get to see the monster too much. But when you do get to see it, it's quite good. The problem is the movie just doesn't give us enough. So coupled with that time continuity that I told you I'm not a fan of, the horrible bitchy characters, which kind of makes sense because you need someone to kill. And then the fact that you don't see too much of the monster, but it does have a good backstory. It's kind of hard to recommend this film, other than if you're wanting to watch some pretty Filipino girls. And they are pretty, but that's about as close as you get to anything. The movie, what could have been done to improve the movie? Well, that's a tough one. Because I think the movie had a clear audience. And the clear audience was teenage girls. And teenage girls around that 18-year-old or the 15 to 18 mark. And I think if you were to ask a teenage girl in that demographic what they thought of this movie, they probably really enjoyed it. So I'm not one to take that enjoyment away from anyone who enjoyed that film. But for someone like me, a bit older, it's just not the kind of movie that I would recommend to anyone who wants to watch a movie about murderous monster men. And this is a murderous monster man, and he does a good job at times. It's pretty brutal. But it's just not a movie I can give you a thumbs up on. So, using the Great Horror Stupid Trash rating, I'm going to give this movie 2 out of 5 ghosts. And it only scores that second ghost because I did like the backstory behind the ghost. I picked it up, which kind of is annoying. But I suppose when you've watched enough horror movies like I have, you do tend to pick up a lot of this stuff. And so piecing together the backstory wasn't difficult, but I still liked it. And so it should get a point for that. And it does. So that's the Debutantes from the Philippines. If you're interested, it does have that really strange mix of Tagalog and English throughout the movie, which I've always asked my friend about. Why can't they just speak all the way through in Tagalog or all the way through in English? And he says, Dan, it just makes them look cooler. All right, cool. Well, I can accept that as a fact. On to the last movie of the night. Thanks, Dan. So this one's a bit weird. And this one I didn't get really into. So it is called Lizard Woman, and it is a movie from Thailand from 2004. So around the same time as Shutter, which is a really good film, came this one. And I'm not sure this is great. So first let's check out the synopsis, and then I'll tell you why it's not great. A group of geologists attempt to recover a mysterious wooden box from a cave, but drop it and it smashes open, releasing the spirit within. While bathing, one of the women in the group gets possessed by a gecko, which turns her into some kind of zombie, killing the rest of the team. A woman who writes a book, and I think the book's about ancient spells or customs or something like that, travels to that location and also becomes possessed by geckos, turning her a bit crazy as her boyfriend, who is a doctor, tries to understand what's wrong with her. So first, a preface. This movie is based on some kind of Thai mythology. So I found that out while I was watching the film, that there is some kind of thing in Thailand about geckos. But for me, as an Australian, geckos are cute, right? And so I have geckos in my garden. They're about this big, really long and skinny. They get stuck to a lot of weird things around here, but they keep the garden relatively bug-free. I like them. They're pretty cool. They're cute. They don't cause any trouble. The geckos in this movie aren't the cute little skinny ones that I have in my garden. They're kind of the big fatter ones, but they're still cute. So for me, looking at this, I don't find geckos threatening. So the movie came across as a bit of a comedy to me, which is not how it should have been. There was clearly an intention for a serious horror movie based on the fear of geckos in Thai mythology. So my apologies to anyone who's Thai, who's watching it and looking at me going, why would you get scared by these geckos? The movie, I feel, has two very distinct parts that don't quite mix together. So the first 20 or 30 minutes follow this group of geologists who recover the box that sets out the gecko spirit. And then they end up in some shack and they all get killed. And then for some reason, we've got this author who's quite keen to know a bit more about it because she's obviously heard the stories about what's happened to this group of geologists. So she travels to this location and lo and behold, she gets possessed by the geckos and she goes a bit nuts. The movie has some boobs in it, if you're interested. I wasn't expecting to see some boobs in this movie. The problem is, you see them for half a second, and you start to think, why do you bother? Why would you even bother putting that in the scene, in the movie for? If it's going to be, and then boom, change the camera shot. Anyway, it's beside the point. I'm not talking about the nudity, talking about the movie. The movie's not that great. I did not pay much attention to this film, I have to admit. I was finding myself wandering, and then coming back to the movie and going, I've missed a couple of minutes. What did I miss? It doesn't fucking matter. But what sticks out the most to me was the blender of effects used. And they're really funny because there's really bad CGI. And I'm talking bad CGI. 2004 bad CGI. And practical effects. And by practical effects, I mean just gecko toys. Sticky gecko toys. There's a scene where one of the guys gets attacked by the geckos. And they all just kind of start rushing him. And it looks so bad because he's moving his body. And whoever's tracking the gecko on his body is also trying to move that gecko in sync with his body. But it's kind of missing the subtleties of it being in a proper 3D world by, the gecko would be also moving around. And it just looks like a flat gecko. Just kind of, if you stuck a gecko to me, it's just like a flat gecko walking around, traveling around the scene. It looks shit. And then coupled with the fact that it uses very early form of CGI effects where the coloring's not great. And the copy that I watched had some issues with it on top of it as well. It's just not a great experience. Is there potential in this movie? I don't think so. Because I don't think the mythology... Wow, hold on. Let me rewind that back. If you're Thai or Southeast Asian and the spirit of the lizard woman means something to you, then yeah, there's something there. For everyone else, it's a curiosity, but I'm not sure it's a curiosity that should take up, considering how many other good movies there are there, especially the first two movies that we looked at in this video. Hysteria, definitely. So I can't recommend watching Lizard Woman for anything other than perhaps if you're studying Thai mythology or you know a bit about the whole idea of geckos being scary. But it lost me on the concept of geckos being scary. And when I saw the first gecko attacking the woman, I started laughing because I'm thinking, this movie's supposed to be about lizards. Fucking long lizards. Indonesia, you got the goddamn Komodo dragon. That thing will kill you. That thing will eat you in half. Eat you straight away. Right? Yet, it's a gecko. I feel, as a Westerner reviewing this film, I'm having that moment recently that you've seen on that woman who reviewed the Super Mario Brothers movie, where she says, Mario wears a cat. Asian people love cats. Well, that's how I feel like I'm talking about right now. When I'm looking at a movie that's kind of not aimed at me, and I don't understand, and I'm talking down to it. That's not fair. But yet I couldn't get into the film. So from a Westerner's perspective, if you're looking for a film to watch, Lizard Woman is not the film for you. Using the Great Horror or Stupid Trash rating, it gets 2 ghosts out of 5, which doesn't make any sense. It should have been a 1 ghost film. So the reason I'm giving it a 2 ghost film is because I laughed at the effects. Now that's a really shallow reason. I understand that, but I'm trying to think of something that lifts it out of 1 ghost because it's not a horribly basement bottom film. It's not Chinese horror movie, Vietnamese horror movie. It still has elements of supernatural in it that make it a little bit fun. But yeah, that's it. Watch it for the crappy special effects. So I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of Murderous Monster Men. I believe that's what I called the episode, right? Yes, Murderous Monster Movies. I have been the Artie Dance, and I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I can see through statistics that you guys seem to be enjoying watching these episodes, and I've been really enjoying reading your comments. So please leave comments there, because I do read them, and I do like to take your recommendations. I recently received a recommendation from a user to have a look at the Tomie movies. So I've only seen a couple of the Tomie films, and there's so many to get through. So that's going to have to be more of a long-term project to look into, but it's definitely one I will. So look out for that in the future. Otherwise, please like, subscribe, comment, all of that bullshit. Subscribe to the Artie Dans on Substack if you can. Otherwise, I'll catch you next week, next Sunday, for the next episode. Thank you very much.